Braydin Frizell.
And I'm Kevin Donnelly.
We're going to be looking at women in advertising in the past, in the present, to try and understand the future.
The origin of the hypersexualization of women in advertising can be found in the pinup girls created by artists such as Alberto Vargas and George Petty in the 1930s and 40s. These erotic depictions of women in sexual positions and revealing clothing became wildly popular and led to their eventual incorporation into the advertising world. Advertisers began to use less edgy versions of pinup girls in commercials and advertising campaigns to play off the intense fixation the public seemed to have on them. One of the most famous campaigns to include pinup girls was the Maidenform Bra Dream campaign. Featuring women in fantastical settings and playing out different dream scenarios, the ads were extremely successful. The use of these erotic images in ads marks a significant moment in the history of the erotic sell, also known as the often repeated phrase, sex sells. Communications theorist Marshall McLuhan was particularly offended by the use of the erotic sell in advertising. He believed it was an attempt to override the reality of daytime with the fantasies of nighttime to drive consumerism. This hypersexualization of women served to further propagate the idea that women were merely objects of desire. Since the media acts as reinforcement of societal structures, norms, and obligations, the position of women in advertising was a reminder for them to accept their lower status in society. However, this trend would begin to shift as time passed.
Studies have shown that an individual's perception of beauty can be greatly affected by the media, especially in advertisements. For instance, in 1985, an experiment conducted by the Washington State University media professor Alex Tan showed that advertisements can augment the value of beauty and essentially transform an abstract concept into something tangible. After showing female teens certain cosmetic commercials, Tan found that the test subjects reported that being beautiful and attracting a mate was extremely important to them. Those results differed greatly from the reports of the control group, which was not shown the advertisements. Advertising specialist Dr. Tom Reichart claims that a 2006 University of Tennessee study showed that only 3% of women in advertising are shown in a progressive manner. This means that only a small percentage of women in media are portrayed in roles of management or professional positions, or ones that emphasize goals, abilities, and competencies. The absence of progressive representations of women that was discovered by these studies presents one of the central issues concerning the position of women in modern advertising. However, there are recent examples of women in advertising being portrayed somewhat progressively. A recent Under Armour campaign features women doing challenging workouts that would typically be reserved for men, but unfortunately they are shown in tight, revealing clothing that still makes them seem as though their bodies are objects of desire for both men and for women. Perhaps the most impressive recent campaign that truly avoids hypersexualizing women is the Dove campaign for Real Beauty. Dove found that only 13% of women are satisfied with their bodies, and that only 2% of women feel that they are beautiful. The ads feature real, everyday women in an attempt to combat society's narrow definition of what it means to truly be beautiful, and to increase the level of comfort that women have with their bodies. The results were extremely positive, and the ads have been running since 2004.
In the past, advertisements were mostly directed to old-school demographics such as age, gender, and race. Advertising companies had a limited amount of data about their target audiences and had to produce media which generalized their interests. However, due to the advent of the internet, advertisers are now able to gather more information on their audience than ever before. On the internet, people are able to redefine who they are and break away from their traditional demographics. Gender is becoming increasingly irrelevant as people begin to organize themselves around what they like instead of other identifiers such as class, age, or race. These forms of organization are called taste communities. Taste communities are online groups of individuals who share common interests and values. Although some communities may have higher concentrations of certain traditional demographics, these demographics are now no longer the driving force behind the organization. This new phenomena is allowing advertisers to target people with greater ease as they learn individual interests through clickstreams instead of assuming interests through old-school demographics. Women are showing themselves to be the driving force behind the social media movement. In every age group, women are more active than men online. This includes time spent online as well. Because they are becoming the most significant group in the fertile advertising sector of social media, women are now more than ever extremely important to advertising agencies. Although it may seem that the female dominance of social media would translate to the female dominance of global media, Dr. Johanna Blakely, a researcher at the University of South Carolina, predicts that this will not be the case. She feels that instead it is going to be the end of demographic-driven media such as chick flicks and other media directed specifically towards certain groups. In the future, we will see the emergence of media directed towards taste communities and the elimination of advertising that focuses on traditional personal identifiers.
So what is a woman's place? The parameters that define the position of women in advertising are becoming blurred. In a constantly changing world where gender is becoming increasingly irrelevant, women are finding themselves to no longer be constrained by their gender, especially in advertising. Just as advertising reflects the status of women in the early part of the 20th century, it will continue to transform to represent how modern women, as well as the women of the future, interact with society.
Down in London town to go. Oh, with the record selection and the mirror's reflection, I'm a dancing with myself. Oh, when there's no one else inside, in the crowded